the all-new 2026 RAV4 GR Sport with a stylish design.
Toyota RAV4 is not responsible if your coworker suddenly needs a new car after seeing your RAV4 GR Sport or if you receive excessive compliments. Style that's powerful, turn heads and corners, use responsibly.
The 2026 RAV4 is serious fun.
I got up and heard something under the bed, but I couldn't see anything. I knew it was there. It was very clear. That presence I felt at every moment, especially at night, ever since we had gone to live at my mother-in-law's house. Welcome to this edition of Tales of the Night. The story that awaits us tonight holds several lessons, useful especially for those who are afraid to look under their beds at night, but also for those who distrust someone close to them, someone like their mother-in-law. Let yourselves go, and value your mother-in-law dearly if she loves you, because today, we will learn that not all of them are like that, and that some are truly terrible. We begin. I want to tell this story because for a long time I was ashamed to talk about it. I know how it sounds. I know there are people who will say I'm exaggerating, that it was all in my head, that maybe I was depressed, that maybe I got sick and my mind started inventing things. And I myself thought that many times. But I also know what I saw, what I lived through. I know what I looked like before I entered that house, and what I looked like when I came out. My story began in a very ordinary way. I met Antonio when I was in my mid-20s. We weren't rich or anything like that, but we both worked hard. We had our things, and above all, we had a strong desire to build a life together. He was a calm man. He never raised his voice, not even when he was angry. Sometimes too calm. And now I understand why. But at the time, that quality gave me a sense of security. When we started going out, he talked to me a lot about his mother. He told me she was a very lonely woman, that she had suffered a great deal, that she loved to cook, and that she would be very happy when she met me. And that's how it was. The first time I went to her house, she welcomed me as if she had known me for years. She hugged me, told me I was very pretty, that Juan Antonio had never brought anyone home, that I must be someone very special to him. She made me food, served me, asked what I liked to eat, and even told me she would teach me to make certain dishes another day, because apparently Juan Antonio loved them, and the way to his heart was through his stomach. I left there delighted. I thought I had gotten very lucky. Not all women get along with their partner's mother, and I even used to tell Juan Antonio to go visit her. If we didn't have plans, I would be the one to say, "Let's go see your mom, poor thing. She's all alone." And at first he would agree. Though now that I think about it, he often did so with a strange look on his face, as if he didn't really want to, but didn't dare say no. Little by little, almost all of our time together started happening at his mother's house. We would arrive, eat there, then stay to watch a movie in the living room, and she always stayed with us. At first I thought it was sweet, a warm woman who wanted company, who perhaps felt lonely. But over time I started noticing things I didn't want to see back then. For example, if I told Juan Antonio I wanted to go to the movies or have dinner somewhere else, she would go quiet. Her whole expression would change. Sometimes she would say things like, "Oh, of course, go ahead, don't worry about me. I'll stay here alone. I'm used to it." And Juan Antonio would feel bad, and we'd end up staying. If I tried to sit next to him, she would position herself on his other side. If we were watching a movie and Juan Antonio took my hand, she would get up to bring something from the kitchen and interrupt us. If he put his arm around me, she would start asking him some question or another. Even so, at the time I didn't see it as anything serious. I saw it as a woman who was dependent on her son. It even gave me a kind of tenderness, until we moved in together. We rented a small house. It was ours, nothing grand. 2 rooms, a simple kitchen, a small patio, and a living room that barely fit a used couch we bought secondhand. But to me, it was perfect. I was happy because I felt like we were finally starting a real life as a couple. That was when Juan Antonio began to avoid going to his mother's house. I would tell him we should visit her, that she surely missed us, and he would say later that he was tired, that maybe another day. I didn't understand, and it even frustrated me a little. I thought it was unfair, because his mother had always been so kind to me. Later I understood why. The woman wasn't sad that we had left. She was angry, furious at me. Not openly, or not at first, but at everything I represented. I was the woman who, in her view, had stolen her son. I was the reason Juan Antonio no longer slept in her house, no longer ate with her every day, no longer told her everything he did. At the beginning, things went well for us. We didn't have money to spare, but we had enough. We bought our things little by little. A television, a blender, curtains, new plates, a better bed we found on sale. I remember every single thing we bought made me so excited. It was like building our home piece by piece. And then our house burned down. It happened one night when I wasn't there. My sister, who was pregnant at the time, had had some complications and I had gone to stay with her to help out. Juan Antonio had also gotten out of work late and stayed at a coworker's place because he had an early start the next morning. So when the fire started, the house was empty. That's what everyone told us. That we had been lucky. That if we had been inside, we might not have survived. We lost almost everything. Clothes, furniture, documents, photos, things we had bought with so much effort. I stood in front of what was left of our house, not knowing what to do. I didn't cry in that moment. I think my body hadn't yet understood what was happening. The firefighters said it could have been an electrical short. The neighbors said other things. One neighbor in particular told me something I have never forgotten. Never. She told me that night, before anyone saw the smoke, she had caught a glimpse of someone on the roof of our house. At first she thought it was a man, but then she said no. It looked like a woman dressed in black, or something in the shape of a woman. She said it moved strangely, crouched over, and that by the time she tried to call her husband, it was already gone. I didn't want to think about that. I didn't have the headspace for it. All we knew was that we had nowhere to go. And that was when my mother-in-law appeared. She told us she had a small unit in her patio that she sometimes rented when she needed money. It was a small structure at the back of her property, separate from the main house. It had its own bathroom, its own kitchen, a bedroom, and old furniture. She told us we could stay there while we got back on our feet. And in that moment, I thanked her from the bottom of my heart. After so much misfortune, I felt like someone was actually helping us. I felt bad for having judged her, for having resented her. The little house wasn't bad. It was old, yes, and smelled a little closed off, but it had everything we needed. My mother-in-law had cleaned it before we arrived. There was a double bed, a wardrobe, a table with 2 chairs, and a large full-length mirror leaning against the bedroom wall. I didn't love that mirror. It was very old and had some yellowed spots around the edges. But I said nothing. At first I tried to see it as an opportunity. We had lost everything, but we were together, and above all, we were alive. That's what I told myself over and over. But from the very first days, I started to feel unwell. First it was my stomach, a constant ache, as if everything I ate sat heavy. Then nausea, then exhaustion. I would get up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. Sometimes my head ached from morning to night. I went to the doctor, had tests done. They told me it was probably stress, that after a fire it was normal for the body to react that way. And I tried to believe that too. But the discomfort didn't go away. On the contrary, I began to feel like the little house itself was hurting me. I don't know how to explain it without sounding strange, or like I'd lost my mind. It was an unease, as if the place was rejecting me. I would walk in and feel like crying. I would lie down and feel my body get heavy. I would cook and suddenly lose my appetite. I would shower and feel nauseated. Sometimes I would sit staring at the walls without knowing how much time had passed. And while I was fading, Juan Antonio started spending more and more time in his mother's house. He would come home from work, and instead of coming in to be with me, he would go to her first. He said he was just stopping to say hello, but he would stay an hour, 2 hours. Sometimes I would look through the window and see him sitting in her kitchen, eating something she had made for him. His favorite things, always. Chicken broth, a stew he loved, fresh tortillas. And while she cooked, she would look out the window that faced directly toward our little house. She would see me and smile. But it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile of triumph, as if she were telling me without words, "See? He's back here again." And I would reproach Juan Antonio. I would tell him I needed him with me, that I felt sick, that being alone was frightening me. And he would tell me not to exaggerate, that his mother was also alone, that after all she was lending us the house and we couldn't be ungrateful. And that hurt me deeply, because I felt like I was losing him little by little. And not just him. My sister started pulling away from me, so did my best friend. They were the two people I always talked to about everything, and suddenly they were no longer responding the same way. If I sent messages, they would take hours or even days to reply. If I said I wanted to see them, they would put it off. I was going through the worst period of my life, and right then I lost my confidants, and that finished breaking me. I felt alone inside a house that wasn't mine, in the patio of a woman who looked at me with increasing contempt, alongside a man who refused to see what was happening. My body started changing too. I had always been an attractive woman, and I say that without vanity. I had a full figure, curvy but beautiful. I always took care of myself, liked to look nice, liked taking photos of myself, wearing makeup, putting on pretty dresses. But during those months I started looking different. First it was my face. Dark spots appeared on my cheeks and forehead. Then my skin took on a dull, grayish look. My hair started falling out in the shower. At first it was a few strands, but then it came out in clumps. I would gather them in my hand and start crying. I also started gaining weight in a very strange way. Not evenly, but as if my abdomen were always bloated. A hard, uncomfortable swelling that nothing seemed to fix. I would look in the mirror and no longer recognize myself. That large mirror in the bedroom had become something horrible to me. Some nights I would cover it with a sheet because I felt like it was giving me back an image that wasn't mine. Sometimes I would pass by it and have the impression that my reflection moved a fraction of a second too late. I know that might sound absurd, but when a person has been sleeping badly for weeks, feeling sick and alone, those details start to weigh more than they should. And one night something happened that I still find difficult to tell. I woke up suddenly. I don't know what time it was, but it was dark and Juan Antonio was asleep beside me. At first I thought I had heard a bang, but I lay still, and then I heard it again. It was coming from under the bed, a quiet sound, like something scraping the wood with fingernails, or like something shifting around down there. I woke up Juan Antonio. I told him there was something under the bed. Half asleep, he told me to let him rest, that it was probably a rat or just some noise the house made, but I knew it wasn't a rat. I don't know how, but I knew. I took my phone and turned on the flashlight. I leaned over slowly and looked. There was nothing, just dust, a box of old papers, and a sandal I had been looking for days. I moved the light from side to side, expecting to see an animal or something that would explain the noise. Nothing. I stayed like that for a while with my heart pounding, until I felt embarrassed. I thought maybe Juan Antonio was right, that I was becoming anxious, that everything that had happened was getting to me. I turned off the light and lay back down.
the all-new 2026 RAV4 GR Sport with a stylish design.
Toyota RAV4 is not responsible if your coworker suddenly needs a new car after seeing your RAV4 GR Sport or if you receive excessive compliments. Style that's powerful, turn heads and corners, you're responsible.
The 2026 RAV4 is serious fun.
Then it happened again. This time it was closer, as if something had dragged itself right beneath my side of the bed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, not wanting to move, not wanting to wake Juan Antonio again, not wanting to seem crazy. I slowly turned my head toward the large mirror against the wall, and then I saw something in the reflection. There was something peering out from under the bed. A face, or something like a face. I can't say I saw it clearly, and perhaps that was the worst part. But the skin looked dark, burned, as if it were pulled tight against the bone. The eyes were wide open, and the mouth was stretched into a smile that did not look human in any way. It was there at floor level, watching me from the shadow beneath the bed. I screamed so loudly that Juan Antonio shot up frightened and turned on the light. I was crying, pointing at the mirror, telling him there was someone under the bed. He checked reluctantly, moved the box, lifted the mattress, and found nothing. Then he held me, but not the way he used to. He held me with fear, not of what I had seen, but of me. He told me I needed help, that I was hurting myself by dwelling on all these things, that maybe the fire had affected me more than I was willing to admit. After that, I began to feel as though something was with me all the time, especially when I was alone in the little house. Sometimes I would feel pressure on my back, as if someone were leaning against me. Sometimes I would be washing dishes and catch a smell of damp earth. Sometimes I would wake up with aching shoulders, as if I had been carrying something heavy for hours. But the moment that pushed everything over the edge happened one Sunday at the market. I had gone alone because I needed to pick up a few things, and also because I could no longer stand being cooped up inside. I put on a big sweater, pulled my hair back as best I could, and went out early. I was walking between the stalls, trying not to draw attention to myself, when a child began to cry at the sight of me. He must have been about 8 years old, sitting beside a vegetable stand while his mother arranged tomatoes and peppers in crates. The boy looked at me. His eyes went wide, and he started screaming, not the way a child cries throwing a tantrum, with terror. He was pointing at me, and I felt a horrible wave of shame. I thought I must look so bad I had frightened the child. His mother tried to calm him, telling him to settle down, that everything was fine, and I kept walking as if it had nothing to do with me. I bought what I needed, and on the way back I crossed to the other side of the street to avoid passing in front of them again. But the woman caught up with me. She apologized for her son. She told me the boy had a condition, that he didn't speak well and that sometimes he couldn't control what he said or did. I told her not to worry, that it was fine. I wanted to leave. I wanted to disappear. Then the woman positioned herself beside me, not in front of me, but beside me, as if the two of us were both looking out at the street. She lowered her voice and said to me, "My dear, forgive me for saying this, but my son sees things." I didn't respond. She kept speaking without moving her mouth much, as if she didn't want anyone else to read her lips. "You are carrying a dead person feeding off you. Here, on your back. That is what he saw." I felt my legs go weak. I asked her what she meant. I told her to help me, please, to tell me what I had to do. But the woman looked very nervous. She kept glancing around in every direction. She told me she didn't know how to remove these things, that her son only saw them, that what I was carrying wasn't just any shadow, that this was a strong working, very strong brujeria. I started crying right there on the street, not because I fully believed her, but because a part of me, a very deep part, felt that someone was finally seeing the same thing I had been feeling. I went back to the house almost at a run, and when I walked into the patio, I saw my mother-in-law coming out of our little house. She had the keys in her hand. I stood there and stared at her. I asked what she was doing in there. She wasn't startled. She didn't even try to hide it. She told me she had gone in to look for something that was hers. I told her that was our house, that even if she was lending it to us, she could not walk in like that. And she laughed. She said, "Your house? No, sweetheart. This house is mine. You are here because I want you here, because I allow it." And we fought. I screamed at her the way I had never screamed at anyone in my life. I told her she knew she hated me, that she couldn't stand the fact that Juan Antonio was with me. She looked at me with a horrible calm and said I was sick, that I was losing my mind, and that was why her son wanted to spend less and less time with me. And that destroyed me, because it was true. Not that I was going mad, but that Juan Antonio was drifting further away. My mother-in-law walked back to her house without hurrying. I went into the little house and started going through everything. Drawers, clothes, under the bed, the wardrobe. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew she had left something or moved something. Then I saw dark soil near the bed, a small trail of it, almost hidden against one of the legs of the bed frame. I crouched down and touched it with my fingers. It was damp. It had a strong, strange smell. Not the smell of garden earth. It smelled like enclosure, like old moisture, like death. I kept searching. Under the bed, I found one of my shoes. One I had been looking for weeks. It had been pushed all the way to the back, behind the box of papers. When I pulled it out, it felt heavier than it should have. I turned it over, and dark soil fell onto the floor. But not just soil. There was hair, too. Long, tangled hair mixed with small pebbles and something that looked like ash. The hair looked horrible, dry, old, as if it hadn't come from a living person. I can't explain what I felt. The revulsion. I put everything in a bag. I don't even know why. I suppose I wanted evidence. Something to show Juan Antonio. Something to prove to myself that I wasn't making it all up. And the first thing I thought to do was go to church. I hadn't been in years. I hadn't approached God that way since I was a child. I can't even say I truly believed in that moment, but I felt so alone that it was the only place I could think of. I went in with the bag hidden in my purse and sat down on a pew. There were almost no people there. I cried, with tremendous shame, trying not to make noise. Then I saw a priest and approached him. I told him I needed help. I showed him what I had found in my shoe. He barely looked at it and told me not to let myself be led by superstitions, that the church did not believe in that kind of witchcraft, that surely someone was trying to frighten me, or I was imagining things from stress. He wasn't rude, but it was clear he didn't believe me. And I left feeling worse than when I had arrived. I felt like not even God wanted to hear me. But now I understand that God acts in ways we don't understand until we have to. Because before I reached the door, an older woman approached me. She had white hair and a rosary wrapped around her hand. She told me she had managed to overhear what I had said to the priest. She asked me if I wanted to come that afternoon to a prayer group. I didn't even know what that was, but she told me it was a group of women who gathered to pray, that she wasn't promising me anything, but that at least I wouldn't feel alone. And of course I went. And it was the first time in months that I felt someone was listening to me without judging me. There were 6 women, almost all of them elderly. They let me speak. I told them everything, about the fire, about my mother-in-law, about the little house where I was living, about my health, about the boy at the market, about the face I had seen under the bed. I showed them the bag with the earth, the hair, the stones. And not one of them laughed. Not one of them called me crazy. The oldest of them took the bag very carefully, holding it through some napkins. She looked at it from the outside without putting her hand in. Then she asked me if I knew where that earth had come from. I told her I didn't, and she explained that it was not ordinary earth, that this had come from a cemetery. I felt my throat close up. Then she said something more, She said it wasn't just cemetery earth, that it appeared to be earth taken from a grave close to whoever had done the working, from someone belonging to them, from someone of their blood. I didn't fully understand what she meant in that moment, nor how she could possibly know it. But the women prayed with me. They asked for my full name, my date of birth. They told me they were going to pray for me, and one of them asked me very seriously whether I wanted this to leave my life, or whether I wanted it sent back to whoever had sent it to me. I said yes without thinking. Send it back. Not because I was a vindictive person, but because in that moment I felt that if someone was doing this to me, they had no right to keep destroying me. That night when Juan Antonio came home, I confronted him. I showed him the bag. I told him everything. I told him I had found his mother coming out of our house. I told him I could not go on living there, that if he loved me, we had to leave. Juan Antonio went pale. He didn't tell me I was crazy, and that was what frightened me most. He simply sat down on the bed and stared at the bag for a long time. Then he said something I will never fully forgive. He said, "I thought my mother had stopped doing those things." He said it as if something he had been hiding had slipped out without meaning to. And in that moment, I understood everything. Juan Antonio knew. Maybe he didn't know exactly what she was doing to me. Maybe he didn't know how far his mother had gone. But he knew she was capable of it. He knew there was something dark in her, and even so he had brought me to live in her patio, to sleep in her house, to get sick beneath her window. I asked him what he meant by that. At first he didn't want to talk. Then little by little, he told me that when he was a child he had heard rumors about his mother, that some of the neighborhood women were afraid of her, that some children weren't allowed to play with him, that sometimes women would come to the house, women who arrived crying or desperate, and his mother would take them into a room and not let anyone in. He told me he had never directly seen anything, but that he knew that in his house, things were known without being said. He also told me about his brother. I already knew he had had an older brother, but it was almost never mentioned. Juan Antonio never knew him. He had died before Juan Antonio was born. He was 10 years old. He had been the first son, the favorite, by all accounts.
The all-new 2026 RAV4 GR Sport with a stylish design.
Toyota RAV4 is not responsible if your coworker suddenly needs a new car after seeing your RAV4 GR Sport or if you receive excessive compliments. Style that's powerful, turn heads and corners, use responsibly.
The 2026 RAV4 is serious fun.
He died under strange circumstances. That was all Juan Antonio told me. That he had fallen. That he had gotten sick. That there were different versions. That nobody really knew what had happened. That some people said he had died of fright. The one thing everyone agreed on was that his mother had never been the same after the boy's death. Juan Antonio told me she still kept his things. The woman had kept his toys, his clothing, his notebooks, as if she were expecting him to come back someday. While he talked to me about this, something inside me began to connect pieces that until that moment had seemed unrelated. The dark earth, the figure I had seen in the mirror, the constant feeling of something consuming me, and the words of the woman from the prayer group, when she had said that the earth appeared to have come from the grave of someone close to the person who had done the working. The next morning I found more earth near the bed. Not much, but more than before. Clearly. It was pressed against one of the bed legs again, as if someone had left it there during the night. I could no longer keep ignoring what was happening. I called the women from the prayer group and told them what Juan Antonio had told me about his brother. They asked me to come that same afternoon. When I arrived, the oldest woman in the group listened very carefully. Then she asked me if I knew the boy's name. I told her I didn't, and she said something I still remember with a chill. "You need to know who the dead person is that you are carrying with you." I don't know why that phrase frightened me so much. Perhaps because until that moment I was still trying to convince myself that everything had a logical explanation. But hearing her say it that way made it feel real, like it had an intention, a history behind it, That same week, I took advantage of my mother-in-law going out to the market and went into her house. I know that was wrong, but in that moment, community. I felt like I was dying and I needed answers. I went through several rooms until I reached one that was always kept closed. I had never dared go near it. It was at the back of the house, next to my mother-in-law's own room. When I opened the door, I felt something strange. It was like a room frozen in time. There were toys arranged on shelves, children's clothing folded neatly, notebooks, photographs, drawings of Dragon Ball taped to the walls, clearly made by a child. Everything was clean. Everything was cared for. It was as if someone still lived there. And that was what shook me most, because the boy had been dead for 25 years. On one of the walls, I found several photographs. In the center was an image of a smiling boy. Beneath the photograph, a name was written, Tomás. I stood looking at that photo for a long time. Then I saw a wooden box on a piece of furniture and opened it. Inside, I found burned down candles, locks of hair, ribbons, old photographs, and earth. The same earth I had found under my bed. I kept searching and found something that sent a horrible cold through my stomach. My own photographs. Recent ones. Some from family gatherings. Others that were printouts of photos I had posted on social media. All of them were folded. All of them had earth on top of them. In that moment, I understood I could no longer pretend any of this was coincidence. I photographed everything with my phone and left the house. That night, I confronted Juan Antonio as I never had before. I showed him the photos. I waited for him to finally react, to tell me we were leaving, to finally choose my side. It didn't happen. Juan Antonio stared at the photos for a long time, and then he simply began to cry. I had never seen him cry like that before. He told me he couldn't do that to his mother, that she had already suffered too much, that she had lost a son and been left alone. And as I listened to him, I understood something that broke my heart. It didn't matter what was happening to me. It didn't matter how sick I was getting. He was never going to stand up to her. Even if he watched me wither away, even if he saw me dying. We argued for hours. I told him I was being consumed. I told him I was very afraid to stay there. I told him I barely recognized myself in the mirror. And even so, he refused to leave. So that same night I made a decision. I left. I had no money. I had no plan. But I left. As I got better, some people began to come back around. My sister was one of them. One day while we were talking, she confessed something she had never told me. Something very strange. She said that during the months I was living at my mother-in-law's house, it had been very hard for her to talk to me. That every time we spoke on the phone or spent time together, she would start to feel sick. Severe headaches, nausea, a strange feeling of exhaustion that would come on suddenly. She told me she had hung up on calls with me more than once and had to lie down, and that as guilty as she felt, she had gradually started avoiding me. She thought it was stress from her pregnancy, until it stopped. My best friend told me something similar a few weeks later. She said she had even started to think I was bad luck, that it sounded awful to say, but that every time she came to see me, she would go home feeling drained and unwell. Neither of them knew what the other was going through, and both of them told me something very similar once I had been out of that house for months. Once they stopped feeling it. Once I was better. Once it was gone. Whatever was in that house didn't just want to kill me. It wanted to consume me slowly. It wanted to leave me completely alone. And now, community. All I can tell you is that I know Juan Antonio is not well. That he is very thin now. That he has no hair. And that his mother is the same. That they both seem dead inside. And I feel very sorry for them. But I feel very well for myself, because I did not deserve any of it. Greetings to the Tales of the Night community. I just want to tell you that I am doing better. And please learn from my story, because I know there are people out there who need to hear it. Have a very good night.
The all-new 2026 RAV4 GR Sport with a stylish design.
Toyota RAV4 is not responsible if your coworker suddenly needs a new car after seeing your RAV4 GR Sport or if you receive excessive compliments. Style that's powerful, turn heads and corners, you're responsible.
The 2026 RAV4 is serious fun.